Alright everyone, we're going to move on to the upper receiver, but before we move on to the upper receiver we need to do two more things to the lower that was forgotten. We're going to go ahead and add in a cube, scale it in, move it up, and move it up. We're just going to give it a difference modifier, push it down just like so, sharpen it, go into edit mode and connect any lines that are needing to be connected. And we're going to try this out as well. At last. Okay, we've got that done. I'm going to grab these two lines here, subdivide them to where there's a line in the middle. That way we get a way to jump all these off. J. We'll do the same thing to the other side here. J. J. Okay, we've got those jump off. We also have another jump off point for all of this, so I'm going to clean this up real quick and speed it up so that way you're not wasting too much time, and we'll resume from there. Okay, we've got that part in. Next part, we're going to add this little inset piece here. So I'm just going to take it, press D, go to knife mode, and we're going to leave it on box. Make sure our object is selected here. And we're just going to run it all the way through. As we can see, it caused a wee bit of an issue at last. Make sure we're all still good to go here. With this, I'm going to mark it, and we're going to take the entire loop all the way up to here, and we're going to scale it in. Scale it down. Maybe not so much. We're going to scale it down just slightly, and I'm going to move it back up to where it needs to be. We're going to take this loop here, mark it, take this loop, and mark the same. So now we have that little offset piece here. I'm just adding this in for a point to jump off of. Move that down and out. Move that one down. Instead. Okay, so we got that line on there now. And we're ready to move on to the upper receiver. So make sure you save. We can go ahead and hide this and get rid of our reference. Start by Shift A, add image just like the last time, reference image, and then we are going to select our upper receiver, load the reference image in, and try to get it to match up as best as we can. And it's going to be a little off due to the obvious image parallaxing, but for the most part, we can keep it pretty simple. Now, with this upper receiver, there is no forward assist, so all of you guys who are about to freak out and yell at me and say there's no forward assist, well, there's a reason and a method behind the madness. So, what we need to do is get our upper receiver going, and the upper receiver is pretty easy. Okay, and to start by making the upper receiver, I'm going to add in a cube, scale it in to where it is slightly bigger than the thinnest part of the lower. I'm going to scoot it up. Once we scoot it up, I'm going to go ahead and make sure it is as close as we can get it. That's about fine for me. Going to take the top part of the cube and make it equal to the top part of this. Going to grab the front and just scoot it out to the front, and do the same for the back. Make it equal, close to equal with the lower as possible. Something like that'll work. And since our parallax is a bit off, what we can do is just kind of drop this down just so it is equal with the upper as we can get it. A little bit of a gap difference is fine. It's never going to be perfect. I'm going to go ahead and take this and make it a little bit smaller just so we can deal with a bit of the parallax and the distortion from the image. So we got that there. I'm going to add a loop cut down the middle. Try to split the difference, and then we're going to bevel it to about like so. And then from here, I'm just going to scale it out on the x-axis to where it is almost as wide as this. And then on the top, we can kind of scale it in to where it's equal with this top line that we made on the lower. About like so. Go ahead and take our bottom face and kind of scale it out just slightly to where it's equal with this part, just barely. And we kind of have the bases of our upper ready to go. So I'm going to scale this just slightly bigger than that because it's kind of like that in real life. And then we're going to extrude it all the way up to about right here. And leave that where it's at. And in fact, we're not even going to do that. We're just going to leave it like so. Once we get our receiver sort of shaped like this, I'm going to go ahead and sharpen it, apply the scale to it, and I'm just going to mark those as well. We're going to add a small bevel profile to it just so we can kind of see what's going on, and we're going to change the limit method from angle to weight again. So we have this kind of shape going on. So right off the bat, we need to start cutting into this. And to do so, we're just going to start with this cut here. It's the first and simple one. So we'll go into orthographic and into X-ray, and I'm just going to make sure this is selected, make sure we're on cut and box mode. Try to get it as accurately as you can. We can always move it. I'm going to bevel the edges to where it matches, move it into place, and then we're going to extrude it inwards to the point where it looks like it's going to match up with our reference. So I'm just going to push this in, grab this face and pull it out so we don't have any issues. Felt like that is good. Now across the bottom, I'm going to add an angle. So we're going to go into N-Gon mode, draw from here down, and just kind of cut through the cutter. And we're going to try to get that to match as much as we can. And instead of doing that, I'm going to leave it blank, leave it like so. And I'm going to add a loop cut through our box here. Get up to the point and we see that angle. Go ahead and do it like that. And we can hide our cutter, C-sharp the upper. We're left with this type of a shape. Next up we need to add in our brass deflector. So I'm going to do Shift A, Mesh, Cube, scale it in, and we're going to try to match the size as best as we can. Something like this will work. I'm going to go into edit mode, grab this face, and just scale it in on the Y. Scale it down. And bring it back. So we're left with something kind of like this. Now all we have to do is get the positioning right. So the up and down position is pretty well done. Kind of get it in there. Then we're going to grab this face again just to poke it out, make sure it is where it needs to be. I'm going to grab that edge and just kind of play with some stuff to get it the way you want. It doesn't have to be precise, it just has to be a brass deflector. And we're going to move it a little bit forward. I'm going to go ahead and recall this last cutter here. Grab this face and kind of pull it down. Grab that face and we're going to pull it down. Doesn't have to be a big old beefy anything. So I'm going to recall that cutter and we're going to difference this just slightly so we can get rid of that edge there. I'm going to join this after I C-sharp it to this. Booleans, union. I'm going to go ahead and hide it and C-sharp it. And we're nice and connected. So we do need to do a little bit of cleanup, but that's not a huge deal. I'm going to grab all of these faces and we're just going to push it slightly forward. Just like that. I'm going to turn off our bevel and realize that we have a big, giant, nasty mess. I'm going to merge it last. Nice and fixed up. And then we'll just do some cleanup here. I'm going to subdivide this edge so that we have another jump point. And then from here, I'm just going to knife across the top just to give us something to connect to. Do the same over here. Just to give us something to connect to. And then I'm going to add a loop cut here. And we're just kind of cleaning some stuff up. Just doing cleanup, enable our bevel, see what we're looking like. We're still looking pretty good. And if we add a weighted normal, it will get rid of that as well. So I'm just going to delete it for now. Mark this as sharp. Next up, we need to actually make the cut into here. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and connect these. Just so we have that angle there, and I'm going to mark that as sharp as well. We're going to draw a box across, bevel it, push it all the way through, and then we're going to go into X-ray mode just to kind of get it to the right size. About like that works. I'm going to pull it back. We want it nice and deep for when we add the bolt. Go ahead and hide that. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and subdivide that, subdivide that, and we're going to connect these two together. And then right after, we're going to bevel it, slide it up a little bit, and then we're going to slide it out a little bit. We're going to mark these as sharp. Turn back on our bevel. It already is on. Make sure we're looking good. And then we're going to just do some cleanup like we have been. C-sharp this. Go into the area where we have these sharps here. We're just going to get rid of all the unnecessary sharps that last boolean gave us. And we're just going to do the classic cleanup from here. We need to add in our second cut, which is going to be this little piece here. And that one is going to be mirrored on both sides. So bevel. It's a nice size bevel, so we're going to do that. B. Just push it through, and then we can finagle it into its proper position. Going to pull it out, until it is even with the lower. Click that, and we're just going to mirror it onto this side. Okay, we can go ahead and C# this, and then go in and do our cleanup. Now, we don't really have a reference as far as what to do on the other side, but that's not going to be an issue. We can easily take care of that. So continuing on, we need to add a little slot for rail systems to hook into and for our dust cover little pin there. So I'm going to go look from this side, draw a box in, GX, and we're just going to slide it to about right here. Go into orthographic mode and just kind of place it where it needs to be. So I'm just going to go down slightly further than what our reference shows here and a little bit more in. Instead of, okay, I'm just going to push it in a little bit. And then we are going to mirror it. We can go ahead and hide it. And then on the bottom we need to make a little channel for a pin, and this one is not going to be mirrored. So we can cut this one, push it back. I'm going to grab this face, push it in just so it's a bit more manageable. And we're just going to give that a slight angle. Do the same on this side. Kind of push it in a little bit more. And then I'm going to add a loop cut straight down the middle. Scooch it over to the side, and then we're going to take this face and just extrude it down on the Z for another key slot for the rail to go into. I'm going to push this back to where it needs to be. Just like so. Go ahead and hide that, sharpen it. And then on this side we need to pretty much do the same thing as far as this cut goes. I'm going to press D, end gun. I'm just going to go in and down. Push it back to where it needs to be. We're going to look at it on the x-axis just to get the line up position right, about like so. I'm going to take just a slight bit off the front here, sharpen it, and we're looking pretty good so far. So the next step, we can go ahead and just push this in a little bit because it's a bit out there. Just like that. And we can go ahead and start cutting in the proper shapes that it needs to be. Okay, and next up we're going to do is add this little cut here. So I'm going to grab this, name it upper underscore high. We'll just leave it upper underscore high. I'm going to go ahead and hide it. And then we're going to go to grab this piece here. From this position all the way down to this position, we're going to Shift D, duplicate it, bring it out, P selection, A, S0, S, X0, E, just to extrude it out along the X, I'm going to do E to pull it out along the Y. Instead of that, we're going to select all of it, E, Y. I'm going to get rid of the bevel and the weighted normal. Go ahead and extrude this up. I'm going to look at it from this position here and extrude it. Get it to match our angle as close as possible. It doesn't have to be super exact. E, E, and then we're just going to extrude it straight down from there. So now we have the profile that we need. Go ahead and scoot that to there. We're going to grab the upper. This and that, difference. Make sure our gapping is good. It is. Go ahead and hide it and C-sharp this. Shift A or Tab, select all, Shift N, just to make sure the normals are good to go. And now we can do some cleanup. Join it last. We can leave that the way it is. Like I said, we're just going to be doing regular cleanup here. Making sure we are all ready to rock and roll. So, got some issues here. Go ahead and fix that, because we didn't do that earlier. I'm going to Control R and add a loop cut in. Even though it just added a single point, that's fine. Merge those at the center. Join that. Join that. And like I said, we're just cleaning up some of this geometry here. We can scoot that because it doesn't need to be that low, and we can do the same thing on this side too. Add a loop cut in. Go ahead and move it over there. Join it. Now I am going to pull this back out because I'm not entirely sure why we cut that off. We just want it to be kind of flush with this. I'm going to add a position down the middle here, and then we're going to Control Shift B to bevel it and roll it out to where we're about like that. And then we can knife in and fix that later on. Instead of knifing in, we're going to make it life easier. I'm going to go ahead and pull that out a bit more. Shift A, add a cube. Push it up. Make sure we're about even. This edge is going to get beveled. Go ahead and push that there. This edge will get beveled. Booleans, union, can hide it and C-sharp it. And then with box, we could go ahead and cut the front end of it off, just so we have a nice and even cut going across. Go ahead and do some geometry cleanup here. Alright, continuing on, we're going to do a little bit of geometry cleanup again. I know you guys are probably getting tired of hearing it, but that's life when it comes to 3D models. We're going to scoot these just a little bit to get that to match up. Put that like so. I'm going to grab these and start cleaning it up. And as we can see, that's causing a bit of an issue, so I'm going to add a support loop onto that side, but it's not working, so we can't really crowd that edge, so we're just going to try to avoid that at all costs. I'm going to dissolve this edge, and we're going to go to here. This, I'm just going to merge it last, just to kind of clean it up, and instead of merging it last, I'm just going to slide it and then connect it up here. Kind of clean out the geometry. We're going to add in a weighted normal just to see how it reacts, make sure everything's good to go, which it is. We do have a bit of stretching there, but that's not a big deal. We can just leave it the way it is. And that'll smooth up on the high poly remesh as well. So we've got pretty much most of the receiver done. We need to add one thing on this side, which is a little cutout for the bolt release. And that's pretty much it as far as this goes. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and grab all of this and just extrude it upwards. Extrude it upwards. And one more time to there. I'm just going to extrude it upwards again because it was a bit off. But we're good to go. So I'm going to grab this edge here, the entire edge loop, and we're just going to scale it out until we get this type of an angle here. Kind of matching our rail system there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and sharpen it, get it to the right position. We have a rail across the top here. Now we're pretty good. Just double checking our spacing and everything. We're looking pretty good. So for the back here, it is cut off and rounded at that end, and we're going to do the same thing. So going at the top, we're just going to draw in a box and shoot it all the way through and move it to where it needs to be. Grab this edge and bevel it. Move it to where it needs to be. We're going to grab this face and just pull it. And we are going to mirror it, but I'm going to grab the cutter and just kind of push and play with it until I get it right where I want it, which is about right there. Go ahead and hide it, C-sharp it, and we're left with this bit of a shape. Next up, we're going to add this cut. Draw a box, bevel it, extrude it, and we're just going to try to match the positioning of it. So that didn't work out too well because it was a rather crappy box, so we're going to try it again. Give us a little bit more working room. Bevel it just slightly, kind of match what our reference is showing us, and push it all the way through. GZ. Try to get it matching the bottom as close as we can. It doesn't have to be perfect or anything, so I'm going to do something like this. Now we have just a little bit across the top that we're left with, and that's exactly what we want. So we're going to take the bevel, crank it down because it doesn't need to be nearly as high as it is. We can hide this and just C-sharp it. We'll go into edit mode here. And just try to do a little bit of cleanup. So I'm going to grab these faces and just scale it in slightly. And we're going to turn off our bevel for right now and just start connecting some lines. Make these lines nice and sharp. Turn the bevel back on and see what we're looking like. And we're not looking too shabby. Just got to add in more support loops where it's needed. We can grab these edges and make them sharp too, to where we're left with this shape. Kind of mimicking that there. And what I'm going to do with this is we're just going to pull it up until that artifact disappears. And we can dissolve that edge. And I'm just going to bevel this edge once. Give it a chamfer rather. Now we're looking pretty good. So I'm going to take this edge here, subdivide it. That way it gives us this little point here. Just kind of scoot it in and get it connected, ready to go, ready to party. We're going to contain this end gun. Now we have it nice and quadded. I can go ahead from here to there and lightning bolt that where it's a nice quad. And we can do the same on the other side here. We're just cleaning up some of the madness here. Get rid of those bevels as we don't need them there. We can join this line together and join them like this. We're going to shoot across there. It doesn't matter which way it goes as long as it's a quad. 1, 2, 3, 4. We do have a little bit of an issue here. That's fine. I'm going to just GG slide it and do the same thing on the other side if it is there, which it was not. Next, I'm just going to grab this entire face area and kind of scoot it up a little bit just because it needs to be a bit higher. We're now going to get rid of any extras that we have, dissolve edges, and then we're going to take this face here and just give it a nice little bevel. Round it off like so. Next up, we need to add in the cuts, and that's going to be pretty easy. So we're going to add in a cube, scale it down, scale it on the X, scale it down some more. Go into X-ray here. And we're just going to get it to be as wide as one of these cuts. I'm going to scale it all the way out. Before we get too crazy, I do want to try to clean up this as best as we can, so I'm just going to go up into orthographic view, K, add in some work here. leave that there because it's not such a big deal. Give this a chance to connect, become popular in its neighborhood. There we go. So I wanted those lines there because I'm trying to do some cleanup as well as some preparation for the booleans. So that's nice and quadded. We're going to get our thing positioned, which it is. We're going to select this cube, go to add modifier. After we Control A scale, Control A everything, just make sure we're good to go. Add modifier, array, and on the Y factor we're going to just do 2. Get rid of the X factor, and we're just going to add them up to where they're about right. Got those nice and cut out. Q difference. But before we go in, I'm going to add loop cuts where they need to be for support. Just like that. Make sure they all have support loops going straight through the middle of them. It doesn't have to be perfect in by any means, such as the example here. As long as they're about right, we just have enough room for the support. So I'm going to go ahead and C# that. And we're looking pretty nice and tasty. Next, what we need to do, and it's going to take a decent amount of time to get done, mostly because it's just the way it be. I'm going to take this edge loop, subdivide, just so we can get some family-friendly geometry in here. And I'm just going to go through, connect it like so. Now that we've got these all nice and connected up, like I said, we're still just going to go through, make sure we're clean, make sure these have all the nice love and support in their lives that they need. Kind of get rid of some end guns if you can. We're nice and connected. So moving along to the other side, I'm going to speed this part up because I know you guys don't want to see the slow and drawn out process over and over again. So have no fear, we'll go ahead and get that all figured out. I'm going to go ahead and merge that there. And so I'm going to do the other side real quick, all nice and fast, and we'll be back after that. Okay, we're kind of good to go on this. I'm going to go ahead and just clean this up a little bit here. Just like so. Go up top and do the same thing. Alright, we've got our rail on there and ready to go. Next up, all we got to do is just make our cutout for the bolt hold open. So I'm just going to draw a cube to be roughly the same size as our little guard there. Gonna bevel it and just kind of pull down, and we're going to push it through. Move it back a bit. Go ahead and press H, and we're just going to C-sharp it. From here, the only thing we got to do is just make sure we don't have a jumbled up nasty mess like so. Get rid of those. Do the classic cleanup. Kind of contain the end guns to the best of you guys' ability. And we're looking pretty solid. So that's going to be pretty much it for the upper receiver. Next up, we're going to move on to the barrel and the handguard.